About transitions. Hello there. We are now going to discuss about transitions in Premiere Pro CS4. A transition moves a scene from one shot to the next. Generally, you use a simple cut to move from shot to shot, but in some cases you might want to transition between shots by phasing out one and phasing in another. Adobe Premiere Pro provides many transitions that you can apply to your sequence. A transition can be a subtle crossfade or a stylized effect, such as a page turn or a spinning pinwheel. Whilst you usually place a transition on a cut line between shots, you can also apply a transition to only the beginning or end of a clip. By default, placing one clip next to another in a timeline panel results in a cut. Where the last frame of one clip is simply followed by the first frame of the next, when you want to emphasize or add a special effect to a scene change, you can add any variety of transitions, such as wipes, zooms, and dissolves. Apply transitions to the timeline using the Effects panel, and edit them using the timeline and the Effect Controls panel. In most cases, you don't want transitions to occur during the essential action in a scene. For this reason, transitions work best with handles or extra frames beyond the in and out points set for the clip. Transitions are available in the Video Transitions and the Audio Transition bins in the Effects panel. Adobe Premiere Pro provides many transitions, including dissolves, wipes, slides, and zooms. These transitions are organized in bins by type. There is a typical transition workflow for each clip, which includes: firstly, add the transition. You can add a transition by dragging its icon from the Effects panel into a timeline panel. Tip: you can add several clips to a sequence at once and automatically add a default transition between them. Secondly, change transition options. Click the transition in a timeline panel to display its properties in the Effect Controls panel. You can change its duration, alignment, and other properties. Last but not least is preview the transition. Play back the sequence or drag the current time indicator through the transition to see the effect. Tip: if the playback is not smooth, press Enter to render the sequence. There are typically two types of transitions. Double-sided. They combine the last video or audio material from the clip before the cut with the first material from the clip right after the cut. You can, however, apply a transition to an individual clip so that it affects only the beginning or end of the clip. A transition applied to a single clip is called single-sided. The clip can be immediately adjacent to another clip or sitting by itself on a track. You can apply double-sided transitions only when the clip before the cut has a handle at its tail and the clip after the cut has a handle at its head. In a timeline panel or the Effect Controls panel, a double-sided transition has a dark diagonal line through it, while a single-sided transition is split diagonally with one half dark and one half light, as you can see here. So this was just an introduction about transitions in Premiere Pro CS4. Applying and aligning transitions. Hi one and all. We are going to discuss now how we can apply transitions in Premiere Pro CS4. So let's start. As you can see here, we have placed a few small video clips in timeline. To place a transition between two clips centered on the cut line, the clips must be on the same track with no space between them. Let's click the small triangle near the video transition bin in order to expand it. Now, let's click the Dissolve transition bin and just click Cross Dissolve. Without leaving the mouse, just drag it, and as you reach over the clip, you can see that both ends of the first clip and start of the second clip will be highlighted. Once you get this, release the mouse button, like this. As you release it, you may get a transition message box saying, "Insufficient media. This transition will contain repeated frames." Just click OK. As you drag the transition to a timeline panel, you can adjust the alignment interactively. Whether or not the clips have trimmed frames determines how you can align the transition as you place it between the clips. The pointer changes to indicate the alignment options as you move it over the cut. Suppose you have trimmed both clips at the cut. You can center the transition over the cut, or you can align it on either side of the cut so that it either starts or ends at the cut. If neither clip contains trimmed frames, the transition automatically centers over the cut and repeats frames from the first clip, or from the second clip, or from both clips, as needed to fill the transition duration. Diagonal bars appear on transitions that use repeated frames. The default duration of a transition for either audio or video is set to 1 second. If a transition contains trimmed frames but not enough to fill the transition duration, Adobe Premiere Pro adjusts the duration to match the frames. You can adjust the duration and alignment of a transition after you place it. You can also easily copy and paste a transition. You can copy any transition in a sequence and paste it to any other cut line on a track of the same type. Video transitions to video tracks, and audio transitions to audio tracks. Let's see how we can do this. Select a transition in a sequence. Go to Edit menu, click Copy. Now move the timeline indicator to the cut line where you want to paste the transition. Again, go to Edit menu and click Paste. When you paste a double-sided transition to a double-sided location, the transition remains double-sided. When you paste a double-sided transition to a single-sided location, the transition becomes single-sided. When you paste a single-sided transition to a double-sided location, the transition becomes double-sided. You can also replace a transition. Let's see how. Drag the new video or audio transition from the Effects panel onto the existing transition in the sequence. When you replace a transition, the alignment and duration are preserved. However, this discards the settings for the old transition and replaces it with the default settings for the new transition. Try all these interesting video transitions and use them in your work. Basic keyframing. Hi there! In this tutorial we are going to discuss about basic keyframing in Premiere Pro CS4. Let's take one example of how to add a keyframe in a clip. You can add keyframes in the timeline or the Effect Controls panel at the current time. In the timeline panel, select the clip that contains the effect you want to animate. If you want to add and adjust keyframes in a timeline panel, make keyframes visible for the video or audio track. In the Effect Controls panel, click the triangle to expand the effect that you want to add keyframes to, and then click the toggle animation icon to activate keyframes for an effect property. Move the current time indicator to the point in time where you want to add a keyframe. Click the Add and Remove Keyframe button in the Effect Controls panel, and then adjust the effect properties value. Holding Control key and clicking using a selection tool or pen tool will give a new keyframe without positioning the current time indicator, CTI. Tip: adjust the controls for an effects property. This automatically creates a keyframe at the current time. To navigate between existing keyframes, use the keyframe navigator arrow in the Effect Controls panel if you want to make further adjustments. Keyframes interpolation. In this lesson, we will discuss all possible keyframe interpolations. We are going to work in the same example which we have used in previous lessons. So let's start. You can get a precise control over the rate of changes in your animation by changing and adjusting keyframe interpolation. You can choose either an interpolation type from a context menu, or you can directly change one keyframe type to another by manually adjusting the keyframe or the handles. Note, you can also use the ease in and ease out commands to quickly adjust keyframe interpolation. Let's see how it works. As you can see, we have keyframes here in Timeline, as well as in Effects Control Panel too. Just right-click on any of the keyframes in the Effect Controls panel or Timeline panel. You will get a small pop-up menu displaying different options like Linear, creates a uniform rate of change between keyframes. Bezier, lets you manually adjust the shape of the graph and the rate of change on either side of a keyframe. You can create very smooth changes using this method. Auto Bezier creates a smooth rate of change through a keyframe. As you change a keyframe's value, the Auto Bezier direction handles change to maintain a smooth transition between keyframes. Continuous Bezier creates a smooth rate of change through a keyframe. However, unlike the Auto Bezier interpolation method, Continuous Bezier lets you adjust direction handles manually. As you change the shape of a graph on one side of a keyframe, the shape on the other side of the keyframe changes to maintain a smooth transition. Hold changes a property value without gradual transition, sudden effect changes. The graph following a keyframe with the hold interpolation applied appears as a horizontal straight line. Ease in slows down the value changes entering a keyframe. Ease out gradually accelerates the value changes leaving a keyframe. Note, although interpolation methods can vary the rate at which a property changes between keyframes, they cannot change the actual duration between keyframes. Duration is determined by the time or distance in the time ruler between keyframes.